The Romans, the fourth serial of the second season of Doctor Who, first broadcast in 4 parts from the 16th of January to the 6th of February 1965, and written by Dennis Spooner. Now, at the end of the previous story, we see the TARDIS kind of parked on the edge of a cliff, before it eventually topples over and falls off the cliff. Now, the opening to this story, it's a little bit kind of farcical in that we see the TARDIS fall off the cliff, and then pretty much a month later, the TARDIS is kind of still lying there, but the Doctor, played by William Hartnell, and his companions Ian Chesterton, played by William Russell, Barbara Wright, played by Jacqueline Hill, and new companion Vicky Pallister, played by Maureen O'Brien, they've been relaxing, just enjoying a holiday, spending about a month off from their usual time travel shenanigans, because they've arrived at an Italian villa, an abandoned Italian villa, and they just intend to just use it to just relax and have a good time. However, the year is 64 AD, and while Ian and Barbara just intended just to stay at the villa and just to relax a bit, the Doctor and Vicky decide to head for Rome. However, not everything quite goes as they planned. I mean, first of all, the Doctor and Vicky end up discovering a dead body on their way, and they're eventually discovered by some Roman soldiers, and they believe him to be Maximilius Petilian, a lyre player, or a lyre player, I don't know how to pronounce that, a lyre player who has been summoned by Nero. And when they get to Rome, they end up meeting Caesar Nero. Now, for a person who grew up watching horrible histories, Nero was probably one of the darkest and arguably worst emperors that Rome ever had. I don't mean worse than he was bad at ruling, I mean he was very good at ruling, but he was kind of incredibly bloodthirsty. I mean, Horrible Histories did a small song where they identified the 4 worst Roman emperors there were, and the 4 they chose were Caligula, who was quite mad and would kill you if you said the word goat. There was Elagabalus, who was kind of needlessly torturous towards his subjects, Commodus, who would have lions fight the crowd, and arguably the worst of them all, Nero. Now, Nero is played here by Derek Francis, and he doesn't really want Maximilius Petilian to play for him as a kind of professional player. He just wants to prove how much better he is than him. So that's trouble enough. But then, while the Doctor and Vicky are away, Ian and Barbara also end up getting captured by Roman soldiers and sold into the Roman slave trade, where eventually Ian ends up on a Roman galleon and Barbara is eventually sold at auction. Now, she is sold to a man named Tavius, who's a statesman for Nero. And Tavius does actually prove to be somewhat of an ally throughout this entire story. I mean, he tries to reassure Barbara that he doesn't mean her any harm. However, she, of course, having been kidnapped and sold into slavery, she's a little resistant to him. But he eventually buys her at the auction and brings her to Nero's palace. And he tells her that the reason why he's doing this is that she is to now effectively be a handmaiden for Nero's wife, Poppaea Sabina, played by Kay Patrick. And the reason why is that while Nero and Sabina might be cruel, at least she might have a chance of being safe rather than out on the streets or with someone else who may attempt to do her even more harm. At least in the royal palace, she has a chance of being safe. Meanwhile, Ian, as I said, ends up on a Roman galleon where he ends up befriending a slave named Delos, played by Peter Diamond. The galleon eventually crashes, and they attempt to make their way back to Rome in order to rescue Barbara, but in the process, they end up being in the Roman arena, and they have to fight. They either have to fight each other, and one of them has to die in order to appease Nero, or they have to fight the lions. Now, apparently this story was supposed to be a little bit more farcical. I mean, Doctor Who had done pure historicals before. I mean, they'd done so with the Reign of Terror in the previous season, which I reviewed, and I did actually think was quite good. This one was supposed to be a little bit more farcical, which apparently some people didn't like because they liked it to be kind of more historically accurate. Yeah, for a show about an alien disguised as a human who travels around in a blue box, yeah, now they want to go for realism. But in doing so, I actually think the story comes off a little bit more dark than possibly other people would think. Namely, Barbara's interactions with Nero, played by Derek Francis. Now, he, despite himself being married, well, actually, let's talk about Nero's marriage first, because another thing I learned from Horrible Histories is that Nero was, yeah, as I said, Nero was dark. I mean, he did some pretty dark things, including upon hearing of the Olympic Games in Greece, he travelled over to Greece and then insisted he win every event. Basically, he made them include a contest based on poetry so that he could win that, and despite crashing his racing chariot, he insisted he'd still be awarded gold. But aside from that, he also poisoned his stepbrother, tried to kill his mother twice, once by having her drowned and then stabbing her, and then with his wives, he was first married to a woman named Octavia, but then when he lost interest in her, he fell in love with a woman named Poppaea. And so in order to prove his devotion for Poppaea, he chopped off Octavia's head and gave it to Poppaea as a gift. And then he also later on ended up killing Poppaea himself, which, yeah, Nero was a complicated guy. And yeah. But as I said, with Nero, some of the scenes that Nero has with Barbara where he's kind of chasing her around and going, oh, well, how about a little kiss? Just like, yeah, okay, this might have rolled kind of, while this is supposed to be kind of cute, it does come off as a little dark, given that this is essentially stalking, stalking, and he would almost essentially try to, well, anyway. Yeah, it comes off darker than you might thought. Now, the three other things I want to talk about this story. One is it does also draw inspiration partially from the classic story of the Emperor's New Clothes, as while the Doctor cannot play the Lear, what he does with the final, when he is forced to go and play in front of a large banquet, is he says to everyone, now you see, this particular piece that I'm going to play, well, it's of a certain note, and only those that are really educationally minded or truly great will be able to hear it. And then he just kind of pretends to play it like that, to which at the end everyone kind of cheers and laughs and has a good time, and Nero is rather pissed off as well. He believes that he had been the greatest Lear player ever, and the Doctor has just made a fool of him. Despite the fact everyone else is pretending that they can hear the Doctor's music, despite the fact he's not playing anything. Which, I do like that. They do also reference that in the story, that it is the Emperor's New Clothes. The other is that it does also feature into a key historical event, as the Doctor realises this is 64 AD, and thus there is another quite humorous scene between the Doctor, Vicky, and Nero, where the Doctor has evidently heard that Nero plans to have Maximus Petilian play in the arena, and clearly intends for it to be his death, as he plans to feed him to the lions. So he does some quite good mind games with Nero, including, I see you want me to play in the arena. What? Yes, I do. You expect it to be... I might as well do something myself. I'll quote my farewell performance. You know what? I'll make it something really great, something they can really sink their teeth into. But then he manages to get himself out of it by using his glasses to set fire to Nero's plans for Rome, which in turn gives him the idea for the Great Fire of Rome, which, Roman bureaucracy, they wouldn't let him build his new Rome, so what he does is he sets Rome on fire. That way he'll be able to build it all over again. Pretty sure that would have been considered insurance fraud back then, but anyway. The last thing that I want to talk about, and this, I'm surprised they haven't done this more with Doctor Who. I guess it would be hard to keep it up, but the idea of kind of separate adventures. I mean, this is a story where the Doctor and Vicky go off and have their adventures in Rome. Ian and Barbara also have a time in Rome, and while they come close to it, the stories never actually intersect. Surprisingly, there's always something that keeps them away. I mean, even Vicky, hearing that Poppaea wants to poison one of her new slaves, which actually turns out to be Barbara, she ends up swapping the goblets around so that it would poison Nero instead. Of course, Nero manages to avoid death, and just when they get back to meeting up with each other at the Italian villa, the Doctor and Vicky end up telling their story to Ian and Barbara, and then when Ian and Barbara try to tell the story, they're just like, oh, I don't want to hear a story about two people who are just lazy around all day. It's like, we never get a break, do we? Which I do like that humorous aspect, just two people having concurrent adventures that kind of pass by each other but never truly fit together. I like that. I mean, apparently some people didn't like that so much. They didn't like the farcical aspect of this story, as from that point on, many of their historical adventures, for the few that remained, were usually more serious, ones like the Massacre and the Crusade. But I like that. So, The Romans, overall, as I said, I don't know if it's the best First Doctor story, but it's a fun one. It's fun, it's got some dark moments, it's historical in a sense, and you know what, I think it's good. So there you go, there's my quick little thoughts on the Doctor Who story, The Romans. What will be my next classic Doctor Who story? Once again, I have no idea. We'll have to wait and see. Until next time, see ya.